Tiger Talks in the City. My name is Don Sykes, class of 1979, and responsible for alumni engagement for the Entrepreneurship Council. My pleasure to welcome everyone here to this wonderful WeWork location. Very dear friends of Princeton University, and we're just delighted to have a phenomenal panel tonight. This is the fourth of 4 Tiger Talks that we kicked off this academic year. All 4 have been exciting panel discussions, specifically also located at really cool startup and or co-working spaces in our effort not only to promote our faculty and the wonderful research they're doing, but also to promote some really cool spaces, many of which are led by alumni of Princeton. So, without further ado, I would like to introduce Meng Chen, who is the chairman of PEC, to share some opening comments, and then we'll have tonight's panelists.
Thank you, Don. Good evening, everyone. Well, welcome to the 4th Tiger Talks in the City. My name is Meng Chen. I'm EE faculty at Princeton for 14 years and director of Ketter Center and chair of Princeton Entrepreneurship Council. It's a great pleasure to welcome Princeton University Press to co-organize this concluding episode of the first season here. In particular, I've had such wonderful interactions with Peter. Thank you so much for putting together this most outstanding panel tonight. And as Peter will share with you that he will complete an outstanding 12-year run as the director of the press, and I will also be leaving Princeton University on July 1. So it's such a distinct honor for me to have my last official Princetonian New York City engagement to celebrate Princeton's engagement with the city. Now, entrepreneurship is defined in a very broad way at Princeton. Anytime you initiate transformations through risk-taking actions and value-creating organizations, then you are living the mindset of an entrepreneur. It's not a job title. And in that broad context, the Princeton Entrepreneurship Council, working with many, have started to make a lot of things happen at Princeton. So if you could indulge me with a 2-minute commercial of that, what's happening very close to Nassau Hall. Now, we have created the first Alumni Entrepreneurs Fund, a seed fund to support young alumni early stage startup. 25 outstanding early stage startups in the portfolio 2 years later today. We have launched the first Princeton Innovation Hub. And this e-hub in downtown Princeton has become a center of gravity for entrepreneurs at the university and around us. We are unveiling this fall, the first Princeton Innovation Center along Route 1, which will have a wet lab incubator and open not only to university, but non-university startup companies. First time that Princeton is doing something like that. And we are graduating this month, the first cohort of students receiving the certificate in entrepreneurship. And most importantly, I think we're engaging with alumni. In Silicon Valley, in Boston, many other places, and we're engaging with our neighbor ecosystems, such as New York City. We have to come into New York, because apparently New York folks sometimes think that NJ Transit is not very convenient to get to their background. Well, I share that same feeling as well, and eventually we should have a physical presence in New York City for many things, entrepreneurship being a beachhead, trying to establish a particular mode of operation and test out different possibilities. Right now, we don't have a permanent physical presence. We try to bring people and program together with alumni and non-alumni New Yorkers. Now, Tiger Talks, as one of those many programs over here, is particularly broadly defined, even broader than that definition of entrepreneurship. For a reason, because we were told many what's going on with the faculty research on campus. Now, some of those may be related, as in some previous Tiger Talks this year, to entrepreneurship and innovation, and others might be quite a bit upstream, but they all lay the essential foundation for the entrepreneurial-minded Princetonian. And with that, let me just share with you in 1 minute or two a little story myself. As an entrepreneur and also as a Princeton faculty who recently published a book with Princeton University Press. I was doing these two different things at about the same time, preparing the book and launching a couple of startup companies, including as the founding CEO of the first one. Now, how are these two things related? First of all, if you look at this beautiful WeWork space for incubating, right downstairs, on the way here, I noticed there's a bookshop, children's bookshop, selling actual physical books that you can hold in your hand. And that's amazing. And my daughter, like me, is a bookworm. The best thing that she likes and I like more than anything else is to read books while eating ice creams. I don't know if the bookstore downstairs allow that, but that's paradise. So I was thinking, you know what, when Vicki Kearns of the press contacted me saying that, look, Mom, you were teaching this massive open online course about networks, which is in subject terms related to my startup companies. Why don't you write a book? I was thinking, well, you know, my online video has the power of putting people to sleep within 3 minutes. Why not write an affordable prescription for people suffering insomnia? And indeed, you can purchase that wonderful pill there for like something like $35, maybe it's discounted tonight. So I said yes. Then I realized, oh my God, what did I sign up for? The process of that writing that book and the process of launching startup companies both gave me a lot of liking. They clearly have very different aspects. But first, they share the commonality of somebody having an urge to do something, not because he or she will get rich. Now, perhaps some of these authors did get rich by publishing books, but I haven't received the check, so I don't know, maybe I will too. But because you have an urge, then you cannot stop. Secondly, you try to build a minimal viable product, you try to pivot. And thirdly, it seems that it goes on forever. It just goes on and on and on. They said that budget some time to develop that product, multiply by 2. That's the minimum you need. It turns out the books you need to multiply by 5 or more, at least for me. At the end of it, I was literally vomiting over the manuscript. I cannot read this thing anymore one more time. But like entrepreneurs, book writers, they push, they pivot, they persist. So it's a great honor to introduce the director of a press that has been publishing unique, beautiful, the most outstanding books for so many years. Peter, thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me? Good. I'd like to thank our friends at the Presidential Council, Professor Long Chang, on site, for this open invitation to join you all here tonight. And also our friends at Book Culture, bookstore that's got plenty of copies of Princeton University Press books over on the table. It gives me a great pleasure to participate in this evening's panel discussion for several reasons. First of all, because it's about the enduring power of books in the information economy, which when we think about it, typically conjures other forms of expression. I'm here to defend and to celebrate books. I could be defending and celebrating tweets, but I got lucky. I am very much of the view that the books are the most enduring, most multidimensional, most authoritative form of expression. And economy as any other form of expression. Secondly, it is a pleasure and a privilege for me to be representing Princeton University Press. The press has been around in Princeton. I don't know whether you visited with students. It's been around since 1905. The title of tonight's discussion is Breakthrough Books. Our first breakthrough book was published in 1922. It was by Albert Einstein. It's called The Meaning of Relativity. And it's given us a very, very high bar to meet over the years. We do our best to my colleagues and I, over the decades, have produced a remarkable list of books. It is a pleasure for me to be talking about Princeton University Press books. Most of all, I'm grateful to be able to introduce our panelists, all members of the Princeton faculty, all Princeton University Press authors, and they are respectively Professor Sir Angus Deaton, Department of Economics, the recipient of the 2015 Nobel Prize, a very, very distinguished economist who is the author of Princeton University Press book, The Great Escape, Health, Wealth, and the Origins of Inequality. This is a book about how the modern world economy over the past 250 years has revolutionized human well-being, while at the same time creating a tremendous chasm of inequality. And Angus is going to be talking with us about that. Secondly, I'd like to introduce Professor Nancy Malkiel, who for some 25 years, I believe, was the dean of the College at Princeton. Nancy is the author of, we're going to do this by order of publication. Angus's book was published in 2013. Nancy's book published in 2016, and it is called Keep the Damned Women Out, The Struggle for Co-Education. It tells the story of the coming application to Princeton, Harvard, Yale, some other elite, formerly single-sex Ivy League institutions, as well as Oxford and Cambridge. Tremendous review attention since publication. And Nancy will be telling us a little bit about her book. Third, co-author of this book, Dalton Conley and Jason Fletcher. Dalton Conley is a professor of sociology at Princeton, and the book is The Genome Factor, What Social Genomics Revolution Reveals About Ourselves, Our History, and the Future. I think I've known Dalton longer than any of the authors here. We go way back in the world of sociology. And this is a very, very great book because he and his co-author grabbed the third rail of social science, which is genetics and genomics, and put the connection between genomics and culture and society into context. And he'll be telling us a little bit about that. And last but not least is a book that was just hot off the press. Dalton's book was published earlier this year, 2017. The last book we're going to be talking about is a book called Face Value, The Irresistible Influence of First Impressions. And the author is Alex Todorov, professor of psychology at Princeton, and the world's leading authority on the psychology of faces. Fascinating book. And so what I'm going to ask the authors to do is talk a little bit about their books for around 5 minutes. And then we'll have questions and a conversation. And at around 7:30, we'll wrap up and have hors d'oeuvres and drinks and conversation. So Angus, would you like to tell us a little bit about your book?
Thank you very much, Peter. It's an enormous pleasure to be here. And thank you for that very generous introduction. The Great Escape is about how humanity, or at least a large fraction of it, has escaped from destitution and from early death. For most of history, people lived at or close to destitution. They were at chronic risk of ill health, and perhaps worst of all, they had to regularly watch their children die. There were times and places where half of all children didn't live to see their fifth birthdays. This was true as recently as half a century ago in some West African countries. The escape began in a serious way about 250 years ago, when the Industrial Revolution in Britain set off a sustained improvement in living standards. This was hardly rapid economic growth, but it was sustained, and it spread, first to the rest of Northwest Europe, and then elsewhere. The Industrial Revolution came with a health revolution. Life expectancies began to rise, first for the royals and the aristocrats, and then for the rest of the population. People were not just getting richer, they were getting more years to enjoy their riches. Progress continues today. The world may look like a very difficult and dangerous place today, but it is still as good as it has ever been. One of the greatest achievements of all happened in the last 40 years. In 1980, more than 2 billion people lived on less than $2 a person per day. By 2013, which is the latest numbers, the total was only 750 million. And this is in spite of increasing population in the world, so the fraction living in destitution has fallen even more rapidly. No country in the world has higher infant mortality today than it did in 1960. Historians often refer to the Industrial Revolution as the Great Divergence. Sustained progress in Europe pulled those countries away from the countries in Africa and Asia, which were left behind. Progress is often like this. Some escape and some are left behind. A few people find a way of getting rich or escaping from a disease, but not everyone. So progress is an engine of inequality. Many people think of inequality as a bad thing, and indeed, progress would be even better if everyone got it from the outset. But that is not the way the world is. And if we think progress is good, and the divergence that began in the 18th century was surely good, because it is the foundation of all of our prosperity and longevity today, then it makes no sense to decry the inequality that it brings. Of course, this is not the only aspect of inequality. It has its dark sides, many of which confront us today. The book concludes with a chapter on how to help those who are still left behind today. It makes a principled case that foreign aid is not the answer, because it tends to undermine the within-country political and institutional foundations of economic growth. It also discusses what those of us who care about global poverty ought to do. I urge you to read it. You will see that I'm an optimist, but I'm not crazy. Progress has been far from smooth, and there have been catastrophic setbacks, some not so far in the past. The past century has seen 2 world wars, the Holocaust, the flu epidemic, HIV/AIDS, and the murderous so-called leap forward in China. We fool ourselves if we suppose that we're exempt from such horrors today. And perhaps the Great Escape itself will not be sustained. There have been episodes of economic growth and prosperity before, all of which eventually died out. But the roots of the Great Escape are ideas. They come from the Enlightenment and from the substitution of reason for blind belief and obedience. Wealth and institutions can be destroyed, and epidemics can rage, but it is much harder to destroy ideas. Peter suggested I end by saying a few words about the Nobel Prize in the book. I know that he thinks and is hoping that I will say that the prize was for the book, or perhaps for its publishers. But what I can say is that it's an excellent idea to write such a book with a wide reach just a year or two before you win the Nobel Prize. Not very helpful advice, I know. But the prize helped spread the ideas, and the press was wonderfully nimble at printing a very large number of copies very quickly. So it was only sold out for a matter of a few days on Amazon. The book also gave me a set of ideas to talk about at the many speaking events that Nobel laureates are invited to. Most laureates get prizes for quite technical contributions, as indeed did I, but few are fortunate enough to have a Princeton book to talk about. Thank you.
Nancy Bookville is going to talk her book, Keep the Dead Women Out. But I'd like to say that I have an additional job at the present. I have a job in addition to being director. I'm also a higher education editor. So I had the privilege of working with Nancy in bringing her book to publication, and I would love to hear what she talks about it.
Thank you, Peter. Imagine the good fortune of having Peter Dougherty as your editor. Let me echo my distinguished colleague. It's a pleasure to be here with you this evening. My book is about the flood of decisions for coeducation at elite colleges and universities in the United States and the United Kingdom in the period 1969 to 1974. Literally dozens of single-sex institutions went co-ed in this very short space of time. And what I seek to do in the book is to explain the remarkable clustering of decisions. Why did so many very traditional, very conservative, very elite, very old colleges and universities decide to embark on such a fundamental change? Why them? And what happened? How well did coeducation work in its early incarnations? I've written about the all-male Ivies, Princeton, Yale, Harvard, and Dartmouth, about 3 of the 7 sisters, Vassar, which went co-ed, and Smith and Wellesley, which had high-level reports recommending coeducation, but chose to back away. And I've also written about the first 8 men's colleges at Cambridge and Oxford to admit women. Tonight I'll give you a very short introduction to the American side of the story. Coeducation happened because it was in the strategic self-interest of all male institutions like Princeton and Yale to admit women. By the late 1960s, these schools were beginning to see their applications decline along with their yields. The high school students they called the best boys, yes, they called them the best boys. These best boys no longer wanted to go to all-male institutions. So the key issue was the ability to continue to attract those best boys. Coeducation became the means for places like Princeton and Yale to shore up a first-rate applicant pool and enroll student body. It was not the result of a high-minded moral commitment to opening educational opportunities to women. It was not a matter of a mission to educate women. It was not the result of deep thinking about how to educate women. Rather, it was about what women could do for previously all-male institutions, about how women would help these schools renew their hold on the best boys. Women, in other words, played the instrumental role of improving the educational experience of men. And therefore, it's not surprising that going co-ed did not always well serve the women who were admitted to the early co-ed classes. A related point, the protagonists in this story are men. Save for Mary Ingraham Bunting, the president of Radcliffe, every strategist, every decision maker, everyone leading the charge for coeducation was male. So coeducation resulted not from organized efforts by women activists, but from strategic decisions taken by powerful men. Why did coeducation happen when it did? Changes in application patterns were a trigger, but the larger context of the 1960s set the stage. The civil rights movement, the anti-war movement, the student movement, the women's movement. By the end of the 1960s, colleges and universities looked quite different than they had at the beginning of the decade. The composition of student bodies began to change to include a large number of public school students as well as students from less advantaged families, Catholic and Jewish students, even some African Americans. So admitting women, in a way, followed logically. As well, men and women students in the 1960s demonstrated together, protested together, registered black voters together. Not going to school together seemed increasingly outmoded. All of this, of course, also bears on why high school students changed their minds about the attractiveness of all male schools. No matter which institution we're talking about, it would be difficult to overestimate how difficult it was to make coeducation happen. There was fierce opposition from alumni, as well as significant resistance from faculty and students. By time, I'd tell you some eye-rolling stories about this opposition, but I'll leave you with just one teaser. The title of my book, which comes from a 1970 letter from a Dartmouth alumnus to the chair of the Dartmouth trustees. He wrote, "For God's sake, for Dartmouth's sake, and for everyone's sake, keep the damn women out." Thank you.
Thanks, Nancy. So Dalton Conley's going to talk about his book with his colleague, Jason Fletcher. It's the Genome Factor, and I should mention that in addition to grabbing the third rail of social scientific inquiry in genomics, this is a book that also confronts an argument that was put forth in a very controversial book a generation ago called The Bell Curve, and does so wisely and directly. And I'd like to hear from Dalton about his book, Genome Factor.
Thank you, Peter, for including me in this very distinguished panel, and thank you all for coming out of this scorcher. At least it's nice and cool in here. So you're absolutely right to mention that genetics is the third rail of social science and sociology in particular. Sociology, you hear me better now. I was saying that Peter's absolutely right to mention the fact that genomics or genetics is indeed the third rail of social science in general, but really sociology in particular, which was founded as a discipline, coalesced in the late 19th century against Darwinistic, naturalistic, biological explanations of society, notably Herbert Spencer, and later on Darwin's cousin, Galton, the founder of eugenics. So, as much as sociologists would like to ignore genetics, there's just been persistently strong evidence coming out of other fields, behavioral psychology, most notably behavior genetics, most notably a subfield within psychology, that suggests that you name any human behavior, cognitive ability, ideological orientation, what have you, big five personalities traits, and about half of it is genetic and half of it is environmental. And they looked at anything you can imagine, preference for red sports cars, it's got a genetic component, and sociologists have long been very suspicious of this. I went into this project and went into this field very suspicious of that and tried to knock down the models that showed these big genetic components for all these social behaviors, and I could not. So the best sociologists will say is that, okay, maybe there's genetic effects, but if you get this genotype for, let's say, aggression, and you're born in the ghetto, you end up in jail. And if you get the same genotype and you're born in Princeton, you end up at Princeton Entrepreneurship Council making big deals. But that's a nice adage, but until recently, we haven't actually operationalized that, do anything with that kind of assumption. If you remember, if you're old enough, the year 2000, when Bill Clinton announced the sequencing of the human genome, everybody was very excited that soon we're going to have personalized medicine, we're going to know the go of life and be able to act on that. And then there was a long period of disappointment because nothing came out. But in the background, there's been a lot of work by geneticists, but also by chip makers and other fields, including social scientists, that have brought us to the cusp of a revolution where there is actionable information in our genome today. So, for example, the cost of genotyping chips has been falling faster than Moore's law for microprocessors, such that today, for less than $100, you can learn about 1 million or so of your bases in your DNA, and by uploading it to a server, you can then get 3 million bits of information. If you spend a bit more, you can get all 3 billion bases that vary in the human genome. What good is that information? Well, we're starting to learn that that's overturning our views about race, for example. There are real biological genetic signatures of ancestry. There's no denying that anymore. However, they don't line up with what we call race in America. That's one of the insights. There's a bunch more, but I want to talk about one in particular, especially since this is an entrepreneurship group, which I think is going to, I think that these genotyping arrays, these polygenic scores that come out of sending your DNA or your saliva to, say, 23andMe or Ancestry.com, we can today take those 1 million or 3 million bits of information you get back, and we can calculate what's called a polygenic score for you. And I should say score, but really means scores, because there's one for educational attainment and cognitive ability. There's one for height, which we know is 80 to 90% genetic in modern societies. There's one for body mass index and risk of diabetes and cardiovascular risk. So I think that these scores are noisy, but today if I knew a baby's, if I got a baby's DNA, I could predict its height with plus or minus 2 inches with 95% confidence, not knowing anything about his parents' height or anything. I could predict its IQ. Well, let me put it this way. Someone at the bottom fifth of the distribution on their polygenic score, which is calculated from their DNA, is likely to be 2 standard deviations lower in IQ and get over 2 years less schooling than somebody who's in the top fifth in that distribution. So maybe some of you remember the 1997 Uma Thurman, Ethan Hawke movie Gattaca, where people no longer just reproduce by chance. They would go into a genetic counselor, like many people do today using IVF, and they select which embryo to implant based on their predicted risk of heart disease, IQ, height, and so on. That is possible today. These scores are noisy with a lot of error, but with machine learning and other techniques, they're getting better every year. So I don't know if it's scary, I don't know if it's a business opportunity, but within 5 to 10 years, I think human reproduction, human dating even, is going to look very different than it does today based on the information encoded in our genome and how that's becoming democratized. And so I'll leave it with that. And thank you.
Thanks so much. I have a confession. I met our last panelist playing basketball at Phil and Jim at the Monday, Wednesday, Friday noon game some years ago. We get our authors where we find them. And that's where I found our author and my friend, Alex Kodaroff, author of Face Back. Alex.
Thank you for having me. That's true. That's the main reason I felt Peter actually going on from playing basketball. So good. Yeah. So at the end of the 18th century, the Swiss pastor Johann Caspar Lavater wrote a four-volume work essays on physiology. Some of the best illustrators of the day worked on the book, and none other than Goethe helped Lavater edit the first volume. And the books were phenomenally popular in Europe. In fact, the author of Lavater's obituary in the Gentleman's Magazine compared the necessity of Lavater's book to the necessity of the Bible. Darwin almost missed his chance to take the Beagle voyage on account of his nose, because the captain of the ship, a man of Lavater, didn't believe that the person with such a nose would possess sufficient energy and determination for the voyage. By the way, Dalton was one of the people who followed the Lavater, but I'm not going to talk about him, but he's the main character in the book. So we may all find physiognomists, but the modern science of first impression shows that we are all naive physiognomists. We form impressions after seeing a face for less than 1/10 of a second. We decide on the fly whether a person appears aggressive, competent, or trustworthy. First impressions are literally single glance impressions. First impressions are not only rapid, but also consequential. We are more likely to vote for politicians who are competent, to invest in people who are trustworthy, and to assign harsh sentences to people who are untrustworthy. Fascism is a general feature of our social life. But what drives our first impressions? Using state-of-the-art methods, we can visualize the content of any impressions. That is, we can visualize our face stereotypes. The best way to show what those look like is actually to provide lots of images, and face value in my book is usually illustrated. I usually give a talk, and I don't read, I just show images and talk about research. But the best we can do to verbally describe the content of our face stereotypes is to rely on global characteristics that differentiate faces. For example, trustworthy-looking faces have positive expressions and are feminine. Dominant-looking faces are hypermasculine. With our mathematical models of impressions, we can manipulate the appearance of faces by increasing or decreasing their perceived qualities as we desire. But more importantly, by visualizing our face stereotypes, we can understand why we form impressions. These impressions are in the service of figuring out the intentions of others here and now. This is the reason we perceive smiling faces as trustworthy and disgruntled faces as untrustworthy. Physiognomists got a few things right. Faces immediately attract our attention, and this attention is accompanied by attributions of character. But were they right that we can read character from faces? Physiognomy appears in many modern disguises, from research papers claiming that we can discern the political and sexual orientation of others from their facial images, to startups offering facial profiling services to private companies and governments. This is actually nothing new. The early 20th century physiognomists who called themselves character analysts were involved in many business ventures, mainly with employee selection. The modern physiognomists are relying on empirical and computer science methods to legitimize their claims. But the modern claims as far stretch as the claims of the old physiognomists. If anything, our decisions are often more accurate if we completely ignore face information and rely on common knowledge. I'm not saying that the face doesn't carry useful information. It does, but it is not about character. The face plays an extremely important role in our mental life, though not the role the physiognomists imagine. Newborns with virtually no visual experience prefer to look at faces. After all, without caregivers, we will not survive. In the first few months of life, faces are one of the most looked upon objects. This intensive experience with faces develops into a network of brain regions exclusively dedicated to the processing of faces. This network supports our extraordinary face skills, recognizing others. Until 2 years ago, there was no computer system as good as humans. Unfortunately, this is all history now. And detecting changes in emotional and mental states. There are likely evolutionary adaptations in the human face. Our bare skin, elongated eyes with white sclera, and prominent eyebrows, but these adaptations are about facilitating the reading of other minds, about communicating and coordinating our actions, not about inferring character. On the evolutionary scale, physiognomy has a very short history. If you imagine the evolution of the humankind compressed within 24 hours, we have lived in small groups during the entire 24 hours except for the last 5 minutes. In such groups, there is abundant information about others. The emergence of large societies in the last few minutes of the day changed all this. The physiognomist's promise was that we could handle the uncertainty of living with strangers by knowing them from their faces. Unfortunately, the physiognomist's promise is as appealing today as it was during Lauter's time. So we need to remember the wisdom of Georg Christoph Lichtenberg. He's a fascinating character, and I write a lot about him, and he was the harshest critic of Lauter during his time. And as he put it, consider someone wise who acts wisely, and do not be misled by irregularities on the surface.
In an information economy like the one we live in, there's a great deal that is said about all the topics that have been discussed in tonight's presentation. The difference here being that what has been said by our authors comes from people who have done the work. They have done the research and the thinking. Their ideas have been stress tested, and it is through the publication of their books that these arguments are properly framed for discussion. And now what we'd like to do is discuss and take some questions. Happy to take questions from anyone, and we will direct them to the appropriate authors. Yes.
I am curious about the choice of the cover. Why in the world did you put women almost invisibly in black?
I didn't do it. The prize-winning designer did it, and it sort of contrasts with the white. Why did you?
Nancy was on the right track. It contrasts with the white and the red, and introduces some dimension to the cover of the book. The design of this book was also inspired by a school of design that was prominent among publishers back in the late 60s and the early 70s, when the events of this book take place.
I'd just like to add a word. If you actually look at the book cover as opposed to the screen, it's not subdued and fleeting. You can see it pretty clearly.
John?
Thank you very much. I have a question for Sir Agassi. I was curious if you could define, you mentioned the growth of progress, and I was curious if you could define what you mean when you say that we are progressing. What are some key indicators that you look and maybe measure to make a statement like that we are progressing?
So, I spent a lot of my life worrying about global poverty, and so this is sort of the opposite of that in some senses, this escape from destitution. So at least one of the measures would be something like per capita income. Obviously it matters usually who gets it too, but there's a material dimension which is a large part of the book, just if you like more stuff. But remember, at the beginning, you're starting from people who are living in something close to destitution. And the questions, of course, are whether more stuff is still a good thing. I actually defend that it is, but a lot of other people do not. But the other dimension which I focus on in the book is, if you like, life expectancy, which is a convenient way of measuring health. And so just the idea of living longer. And, there has been an astonishing increase in life expectancy around the world, in rich countries as well as poor countries, over the last, really since the Second World War, in some sense. Now, the book, in order to be, if I dealt with the other things that are really important to measure, my book would be as long as Nancy's book. But if the most obvious one I've left out is education, which would be, just some measure of the number of years beyond that, the quality of schooling. And that has increased enormously too, especially if you work in India, as I have done. The attendance of school among children has soared, especially among girls. And in many of the places we work, you would see lines of girls going to school, even though none of their mothers could read or write. I think there's also been progress on democracy. There's more democracy in the world than there used to be, however you measure that. And Stephen Pinker wrote a wonderful book about the decline in violence over time too. So I focus on money and on health, but almost any indicator you could use would show that we're better off now.
Bruce, I think this might apply to all the panelists. Write a book that has a popular orientation for any reader, based on academic work that presumably gets a lot more detailed and specific. How much does the casual reader lose in the reading of just the general book versus the full academic version?
So the question is, with the publication of a relatively broad book by an academic based on research and academic subject matter, how much does the casual reader lose in reading the book? Is that the question?
Well, Bruce is reading the academic paper.
Versus reading the academic papers?
Because you're only going to gain from reading the book. The question is, what's the gap between what you get out of the book versus what you get from the academic?
It depends on how much math you know.
Well, there isn't a full academic version of my book. This is the full academic version of my book, but I've tried to write it in a way that a reader who is not a scholar or university administrator might be able to appreciate it. And Peter has published it in a way that the footnotes, while they're there on every page, are not such as to overwhelm and daunt the casual reader. But there is no more academic version of this book. If you read the functional equivalent of the bibliography, you'll see it's all there.
I think they're different things in some sense. And what you lose is the nuance rather than the depth. And also, one of us might be telling you a bunch of lies, right? So we're telling you our own interpretation of sometimes very controversial evidence, and that other people really might disagree with, which is, what book reviewers are for. But I mean, you can read the academic papers forever and never get the broad vision that you might get from a well-written book of this type.
I'm, for one, surprised by the conclusions, Nancy, of what led to the coeducation of these major schools, the improvement of attracting best boys, which I think is fascinating. Has anyone looked back on that assessment in terms of what's happened now? What do we see as the contribution of coeducation in these schools in particular?
I was surprised too. This was not necessarily what I expected to find. And it's certainly not consistent with the more uplifting interpretation that some people would like to find. It shatters what one person told me after a recent talk, that I had shattered her illusions. I didn't mean to do that. Sure, I think it matters in terms of the effectiveness of coeducation. If people had been thinking hard about the importance of educating women along with men, and about what women needed to have the most effective educational experience, might have made things easier. Might not have. It's hard to tell.
I just,
Hang on, there's Mike.
oh, thank you. I'm in the class of 75, and I actually, so I was one of those women who just assumed that, of course, everybody was going to let me in. Oh, I would, it just made sense. But one thing that is really striking about this panel is it looks exactly like Princeton looked when I got there. Nancy was teaching, and everybody else looked like those guys. And it's the audience is a little different. That's good. But I was very aware of the fact that we weren't wanted, and that we were there as an experiment. I mean, it was hard to turn around, but I really learned a lot in the last 40-some years, and none of it's really good. And it's the more I learn, the worse it gets. It'd be interesting to talk to you, but it's, anyway, I'm just very struck by that.
Can I just say, being pioneers is really tough. And for the women at Princeton and the women at Yale, just to name the two first ones, who took that on, who were brave enough and adventurous enough to be pioneers, I think we all owe them a great debt.
I realize that your publisher is sitting right there, but I wanted to ask you if you had, if if you had circulated proposals for your books to other presses, and if so, did you look for royalties, advances, prestige? When did you finally settle or go first?
Sure. Actually, I have a long history with unreliable agents, and I can spend a half an hour talking about this. And then at some point, I decided that I need to write most of the book and to be happy with it before I approach anybody. And so at some point, I had written about 1/3 of the book, and I was sending it to friends. But I was on a flight to Amsterdam, and I was thinking, well, I don't need advice from friends outside of the publishing business. I need advice from somebody who knows about this. And since I knew Peter, he was a friend from basketball, I told him that it takes a long time right in Amsterdam. I said, look, Peter, I want to know, is this good? I just need your advice. I didn't actually approach him with the idea of publishing with him. And then 2 days later, he said, I want to publish it. And then, in fact, actually I did, because I didn't have an agent, I read books and book contracts and everything, and I have to tell that Princeton was great. And for me at this stage, the most important thing is to work with somebody that I entirely trust. And that has been my experience with the press from the beginning until so far so good.
Well,
Sure.
a number of books. So as
Two answers. One is that Peter mentioned that we went way back, sort of, when I came out of graduate school for sociology. I had a dissertation on the black-white wealth gap, and how looking at the if you compared apples and apples, that is, kids who grew up in households with equivalent parental wealth levels, not just income but wealth, where the real disparities of 10 to 1, white to black. Then it turns out that a lot of racial disparities in other educational attainment and family formation and wealth, they all went away. And so wealth was the agent of ongoing racial inequality in the post-civil rights era. I was thrilled at that time that Peter, when he was the sociology editor, wanted to publish it, and also University of California Press. And I made the great era going with University of California Press, and always thought, what if? And then I went for the next 15 years and wrote for trade publications, trade publishers. But this book goes also to the question about what's the value of an academic book. This book I knew I wanted to write with more nuance, with talking about all the buts and the well, sort of, and the well, if then statements that a place like Princeton can publish, and we did. I hope it works. There's a lot of appendices that go into the technical caveats and details and everything like that in this emerging field. And I think I wanted to write this book because there is this emerging field, but it's not coherent, social genomics. And you could go and read papers, but you'd have trouble actually knowing they're published, some in sociology and economics, some in nature and science, some in behavior genetics. They're all over the place. You wouldn't know that this field existed. So that was what the purpose of this book was to do, is to bring this together and tell it in an honest way where you don't have the pressures of trying to fulfill a big advance or reach an audience in a way that compromises the scholarship. So for all that reason, I got my second chance, and it's been a happy marriage.
We have time for just probably 2 more questions.
Nancy, when would you say university leaders decided to focus on women's education, and what changes did they make? Or would you say they haven't even still 40, 50 years later?
You know, at various points, college and university presidents and deans have paused and said, in effect, how are we doing? Nan Cohen, as president of Duke, did that in the early 1990s and said, we need to take a comprehensive, late 1990s maybe it was, we need to take a comprehensive look at how we're doing by our women students and women faculty and women staff. And she assembled a task force which she led to study in a serious way the experience of women at Duke. At Princeton, Shirley Tillman and Nan Cohen and I, Nan having stepped down as president of Duke and joined our faculty, we're talking about the absence of women students in the highest profile elected student leadership positions. And Shirley said, we need to study this. And Nan Cohen led a group of faculty and administrators and students to try to understand what was going on. We've certainly paused from time to time to ask questions about academic achievement, about gendered choices of subjects of study. So, and it's not just women presidents and deans who do this. Harold Shapiro did more to promote the fortunes of women at Princeton than anyone. So a president needs to pause and say, how are we doing? And then empower colleagues and students to try to understand how we're doing and figure out what to do better.
One more question, please.
Seems like the theme of multiple books here is inequality in some shape or form. The inequality word certainly appears on Professor David's book, but and also some fields. But even genomics and face value have some equality or inequality aspects, possibly more in mind than some of the other things that we're more accustomed to thinking about. Just wondering, Professor David mentioned that he was an optimist talking about the future. When you think about inequality and our ability to address that, are you all just be interested to know if you're optimistic about what we can do given your area of expertise?
One way to think about for certain outcomes, the genetic penetrance, the relative impact of genetics is increasing, the relative impact of the environment is decreasing. That sounds bad, like a bad future for people. But in one way, you might think that differences by family, environmental differences by what family you happen to be born in are probably more illegitimate and less meritocratic than actual genetics determining where you end up in the hierarchy. And another point I would like to make is that just because something is genetic does not mean we cannot address it. First of all, I'm not saying that inequality is predominantly genetically based, but I noticed that you're wearing eyeglasses. I assume it's for myopia. Myopia is close to 100% heritable in modern society. I mean, there was no myopia, it's a gene-environment interactions, there was no myopia, or very little when we were hunter-gatherers, but now there's a lot in the information economy. But who gets it is genetic. But lo and behold, we have this really easy fix called eyeglasses. So it doesn't mean just because something's genetic that we have to throw up our hands, there's nothing we can do about it. I feel that's true for inequality to the extent that there is genetic influences on it.
Up until this book, everything I wrote was in African American history, Black politics, civil rights, organizations for racial advancement. And what's striking to me as an historian, looking over the course of the 20th century, is how extraordinary the progress is that we have made in civil rights opportunities for African Americans in the United States. What's sobering to me, I guess it's a function of if you live long enough, as a citizen as well as an historian, you understand that progress is not linear, or not always linear. And some of what's rolled things back has to do with leadership in this country, and some of it has to do with intractable problems of inequality that civil rights laws haven't addressed.
Yeah, I could use all the rest of the evening. I spend a lot of my time nowadays thinking about inequality. Some of the harder issues are just knowing what it means, because it's become a word that has multiple meanings, not just in different academic disciplines, but even within disciplines. And it's not clear to me. When I talked earlier, I talked about some of the benefits of inequalities, that inequality often happens when there's rapid economic progress. And I think that's some of what the inequality is today. But I'm actually much less optimistic about inequality than I've been for a long time. And, Nancy talked about the great progress that has been made for African Americans who have a situation in the United States where catastrophic things are happening to the white working class. There's been a huge increase in mortality, life expectancy is actually going down after almost 100 years of uninterrupted progress. And this is clearly connected with some of the more negative aspects. I mean, it's an inequality of itself, because people with college degrees, none of this is happening to them. For people without a BA, the world is falling apart, and they're dying in large numbers. There's an epidemic of mortality from drugs and from suicide and from alcoholic liver disease. And that's a huge inequality which is really getting worse. So while university-educated people's life expectancy is going up, people without a BA, their life expectancy is going down. That's a huge inequality. I'm also enormously worried by what seems to be increasing excesses of corporate power and the changing balance of power between corporations and individuals, wage earners in particular. So I think inequality is going to be on our agenda forever. It was inequality that drove Donald Trump's victory, or at least the people who've been left behind. The people who are dying are the people who predominantly voted for him. And nothing he's doing is going to make that better. And we're going to be left with that problem that could pull us apart, that could destroy us over the next 20 years.
Well, thank you very much. Just a couple of closing comments. First of all, to Peter and our four illustrious authors, faculty members, and panelists, thank you very much for joining us. We have a small gift from the Student Entrepreneurship Council as a token of our appreciation for your time and thoughtful comments. Number two, I want to again just thank all the alumni and guests here tonight for joining us for this short Tiger Talks. We will take a break over the summer, but look for exciting information not too soon at the end of the summer to talk about the upcoming Tiger Talks for season 2. So now we can break, network with our friends, mingle with the authors, peruse the books on the table, and enjoy food and drink. Thank you very much.